There is now an enormous amount of evidence, including physical evidence, that UFOs, whatever they are real. Why don't we know a lot more about this? Because the government has hidden that information from us, outrageously.
Why would any government hide this from the people or not disclose this type of information of what's going on?
Are those the only videos that the government has?
The content that we have is orders of magnitude more significant than the footage you're seeing on CNN.
Yes, there have been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there have been material and bodies recovered.
I saw this person, and it had big eyes. That's all I saw about it, big eyes.
We just knew that they were not from this planet.
He never said anything. It's just that the face is the eyes.
There was no talking. It's all just images in the head. Telepathic communication.
They were trying to communicate, trying to tell us something.
I kept getting these thoughts and ideas in my mind of technology. Technology's not helping, technology's bad.
If you took the case of, are there ETs, flesh and blood ETs, to the court, presented all the evidence, you should win. There's enough evidence to get an affirmative conviction that that's the case. So part of what's going on is we have different views of what counts as real and what counts as evidence. There's a lot of physical evidence with a phenomenon, right? So like you take abductees, people who have experiences of being abducted. We don't need the smoking gun to be able to look at all the other evidence and use scientific methodologies and logical methods of deduction and induction to arrive at a very probable conclusion based on that evidence, just as like we would in a court of law, right? So there's archaeological evidence, there's sociological evidence, there's lots of experiencer reports, there's there have been implants, there's scars, there's body marks, there's scratches on cars, there's a lot of physical evidence, but it's not a smoking gun. But we should be careful not to dismiss all that physical evidence just because it's not a smoking gun.
By October 1954, we had mastered what's called gravity control, which most engineers at MIT and elsewhere do not think we can do today. But that was in a deeply classified project. Now, how do I know that? Because one of the people on my team, Richard Foch, who is the top scientist at the largest Department of Defense lab, the Naval Research Labs, was on my team for many, many years. He was in the vault and saw the papers that proved and stated October 1954 is when we mastered gravity control. Ironically, that in 1955, Eisenhower started the U.S. interstate highway system. And by that date, we didn't need highways.
Declassified U.S. government documents and witness testimony from former or retired U.S. military personnel confirm beyond any doubt the reality of ongoing UFO incursions at nuclear weapons sites.
What you have heard here today is evidence of a phenomenon. It sounds fantastic, and it is fantastic.
Malmstrom was America's first line of nuclear defense. Its silos packed with Minutemen missiles, each one nearly 100 times more powerful than the bomb that devastated Hiroshima. Launch officers could, within minutes of confirmation, send their birds arcing 6,000 miles to incinerate key Soviet cities, triggering a war that would end our civilization.
Screaming into the phone saying they're looking a red glowing object hovering just above our front gate. Our missiles began going into what's called a no-go condition or unlaunchable. Essentially, they were disabled.
We have UFOs in the area.
These witnesses are some of the most highly vetted military officers in charge of the world's most devastating armaments. UFOs have been making incursions into top security nuclear facilities.
Part of my study of this phenomena using my integral approach is I've identified, over 35 different theories about who are they and what are they, right? There's the time traveler hypothesis, the crypto-terrestrial, the ultra-terrestrial, the extraterrestrial, the, sociological hypothesis, there's all these different theories people have. When I map those out and I look at what are the different variables that they're highlighting, where are they from, what's their kind of consciousness they have, what kind of bodies do they have, what's their intention. When I look at 8 different variables about what's being described, and I look at the 3 or 4 possibilities of they're on this planet currently, or they're from other planets, or they're interdimensional. When I kind of map out all the variables, there's 25 variables. And what's interesting is these theories, these 35 different theories that have emerged over the last 2 decades, essentially, when you add them all together, they're accounting for these 25 different possibilities. So in other words, what seems to be happening is every conceivable combination of who they are is represented in kind of this growing list of who they might be. And it seems that actually all of them are potentially true in some sense, or at least a majority of them are true.
Interesting.
So that there are ultra-terrestrials, there are crypto-terrestrials, there are extraterrestrials, there are interdimensionals. All of this seems to be happening, right? And it's kind of this Pandora's box. And this is partly why some people have certain experiences with some of those, and other people have other experiences with, different sets, right? And then you kind of end up arguing, well, who's right? Well, actually, I think the cosmos is so diverse and creative, there's a good chance we're likely interacting with all of those different possibilities.
Doc, you said they are worried that we are a threat. Who's they?
The extraterrestrial civilizations.
They think we're a threat.
Yes.
Decade after decade.
To me, it's pretty clear. This is just, we're shining a light on this, we're pointing it out. What are you people doing with nuclear weapons?
These objects gave the impression that they wanted to be seen. With these enormous spotlights, there was no way that they were trying to hide. So why? That is the main question. Why do these objects want to be seen?
One of these projects was called Project Red Light. The purpose, according to this document, was to back engineer captured extraterrestrial technology for adaptation into the United States space program.
October 1954. That was the date we mastered gravity control. What I mean by gravity control are high voltage systems that cause an object to what looks like levitate or move the way that vehicle that you saw in that video released by the Pentagon this week. And they confirmed, yes, this is real footage. And they released 3 different videos. What they didn't say is that there is an unacknowledged compartmented program that began studying this in the 40s and 50s, and by 1954 had figured out how those things operate. So when you see one of these objects, you have to ask a question. Is it a classified or is it interstellar? And both are out there, by the way.
They are all over the board. Some it's ancient aliens, or some it's, it's us from the future, right? Or
Right.
It's some it's they're from other star systems. No, they're from other dimensions. They're, so there's a lot of variety. But it's interesting that kind of in the course of human imagination, we've come up with all the possibilities, all the combinations are represented in that list of 37, right? So you have an approach like SETI that says, there are probably, life on other planets, but it's very far away, and we're looking for radio signals, and, we're trying to kind of tune in to their channel, and they're not coming up with, there's nothing has come out of the SETI project basically over the last 40 plus years with a lot of funding, right? And so it's interesting. You compare that with kind of ufology, which has a lot of craziness in it, but when you pull away a lot of that craziness, there's a lot of evidence. You have multi-witness reports. You have lots of multi-witness reports, so there is quite a case to be made, and again, I think for me it often comes back down to different perceptions based on different subtle bodies, based on different subtle senses associated with those bodies. And because we still tend to privilege our five senses in our physical body, and we want physical evidence that matches our, vision and our hearing, that we tend to have a very narrow view of what is evidence, right? And so what does a broader but still very scientific and rigorous view of evidence look like that's able to include and compare experiencer reports, able to understand how the brain works in relationship to this phenomenon? The government knows a lot more, at least sections of the government know a lot more than what they're letting on, is because I was told by a CIA agent that they actually have a test to determine if you have alien DNA in your system, right? And so maybe not, I don't know. But this person's a trustworthy person. I don't have any reason to believe that they're pulling one over on me. But it's like there's those kinds of things that get said by certain people who seem to have knowledge about these things that just kind of boggle your mind.
The CIA said to all the people there, this event never happened. We were never here. And you're all sworn to secrecy.
There is some group of people somewhere that may or may not be associated with government at this point, but certainly were at one time, that have this knowledge.
I did attempt to find out if there were any secret government documents that reveal things, and if there were, they were concealed from me too. I wouldn't be the first president that underlings have lied to or that career bureaucrats have waited out. But there may be some career person sitting around somewhere hiding these dark secrets even from elected presidents. But if so, they successfully eluded me, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell you I did try to find it.
Are you saying that there's some evidence that's still hasn't seen the light of day?
I'm saying most of it hasn't seen the light of day.
The next president is likely going to be a UFO president, right? Like this topic is likely to come to a head where whoever is president is going to probably play a big role with some major steps in the disclosure project, either shutting it down or moving it forward. And that would, like, these things are kind of coming to a head, and that, the whole effort around the legislation that got gutted in December was basically to kind of try and set up that possibility so that the presidential candidates campaigning in the fall would have to speak to this topic, right? And like make this a major kind of, issue for their candidacy. There have been presidents that have been briefed to an extent, not much, and so there is a real interesting history around which presidents have known what at which point. But I think it's fair to say none of them have really known much except for the early ones, like Truman and Eisenhower, who were directly involved with creating, what's now thought of as the truth embargo, putting in place the CIA and other mechanisms to kind of manage this until we got a handle on it. And then by that point, it was like, why let the cat out of the bag now?
Look, the reason it's being kept so secret is because the technologies behind how those objects move, they have no jets, they have no rockets, they're not an internal combustion engine, and they most certainly don't have a nuclear power plant on them because there's no heat signature, and nuclear power fission is hot. When you look at them, you realize it's a whole new physics, a whole electromagnetic propulsion type system using very high voltage systems, similar to what Nikola Tesla and other people stumbled across in the early 20th century. But I said, if that were to be disclosed, we would terminate oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, wind, solar, you name it, and public utilities. You're talking a huge transformation in how the world operates. Now, on the one hand, it would be disruptive to the status quo of the macroeconomic system. On the other hand, it would end all pollution. It would end all poverty in 20 years, and everyone on the planet would have quote-unquote free energy from what's called the zero-point energy field, and we can discuss this later. So he said, I get it. So, it's about power, money, and the corrupting influence of it. It is not about science, because once you drill down the science, the evidence is absolutely overwhelming.